The Autism Research Institute relies on the generosity of donors like you to make this webcast possible. If you enjoy this presentation, please consider making a donation. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch and are ready for the second half of the day. So a little introduction about myself. I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at the UCLA Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. I received my doctorate in clinical psychology from the University of California, Santa Barbara, under the advisement of Drs. Robert and Lynn Cagle. And there I received extensive training in pivotal response treatment, so I'm familiar with behavioral interventions. Oh, down. Okay, great. Quickly, today I'm going to be talking about some of the research that we're conducting at UCLA on evidence-based social skills program for adolescents with ASD. And before we start, I want to quickly acknowledge our funding sources and our donors for their generosity, as well as the dedication of our research collaborators, research assistants, and administrative staff. And most importantly, the families, because without their participation, this work really wouldn't be possible. I want to provide you with a quick overview of our presentation. I'm going to start off by going over the social deficits that are common among adolescents with ASD. From there, I'm going to move on to talking about some of the research on social skills interventions, starting off by talking about some of the limitations of existing social skills interventions, and then moving on to the effective methods of social skills instruction. So what is the research telling us in terms of effective ways to teach these skills to our adolescents? From there, I'm going to talk about the UCLA Peers program, provide you an overview of our curriculum, and also provide you with 2 clinical examples, and hopefully provide you with some tools and strategies along the way. And then earlier today, Dr. Leaf talked about the importance of evidence-based treatments, and so I'm going to end with a summary of our research findings and also talk about our future research directions. So I want to start by talking about the common social deficits among adolescents with ASD. And we heard a little bit this morning about their social communication deficits. So typically what we see in teens is that they have difficulty with topic initiation. Many of their conversations will focus on their restricted interests or their circumscribed interests. And you'll notice that oftentimes their conversations will leap back to these restricted interests. And it's not necessarily that they can't talk about other things. It could be related to the fact that they don't think about talking about other topics, or it may be related to their difficulties with topic initiation, where they may not know what else to bring up or in what way to bring up those different topics. And so you can imagine, if you have difficulty with topic initiation and if you're always falling back on these repetitive themes, that your conversations may tend to become very one-sided. And these are conversations where maybe somebody is speaking at you, or conversations where they're asking a lot of questions, but they're not necessarily sharing any information about themselves. And when you think about the foundation of friendships or any kind of peer relationship, they're really based on things that you have in common, right? I want you to think about your relationships. Think about the things that you do with your friends or things that you guys talk about. They're really based on these shared experiences, shared interests that you have. And oftentimes our teens aren't able to identify those in their conversations. Another common deficit is poor social awareness. So many of our teens will have difficulty understanding social cues. And they also have difficulty decoding their social landscape, which is typically their school setting. So they may not be aware of the different peer groups that are out there. And so our job is to really help our teens start to examine their social context in a different way, where they can start identifying these peer groups and really start figuring out, which of these peer groups are going to be an appropriate fit for me, and within that group, who do I want to start getting to know a little bit more. We also know that many of our teens have a very fragile social motivation. So this is often manifested in less involvement in social activities. And this is problematic because then a lot of our teens become socially isolated. And it's within the context of these social activities where they could meet peers who have similar interests and could potentially become friends. And so it's really important that our teens are involved in a range of social activities. Another way that poor social motivation is manifested is through a lack of peer entry attempts. And that basically comes down to not going up to or interacting with a range of peers in a more frequent basis. And finally, our teens commonly exhibit poor social cognition, and this is a core deficit for individuals on the spectrum. They have difficulty understanding the perspectives of others and really putting themselves in the other person's shoes. So understanding the other person's experiences, thoughts, feelings, and you could imagine how that could significantly impact their ability to not only interact with people, but empathize and form these meaningful friendships. So these are some of the common deficits that you'll see among teens with ASD. It's important to think about, what are the consequences. When you think about their relationships, because of those difficulties, a lot of our teens experience peer rejection. So they will be verbally teased by their peers, they may experience physical bullying, and they may also have a bad reputation. Now this reputation could be, some of our teens, because they lack some of these skills, they may use humor as a way to cope or interact, or they may initiate in inappropriate ways. And so they may have reputations, and a lot of our teens will come up to us and say, I'm known as a weird kid. And so it's really about, how can we help these teens who are being actively peer rejected. And then we have another group of kids who may be more socially neglected or they're isolated. And these are teens that may have a limited peer network, they have few friendship options, and overall they're less socially engaged. So in our clinic, we think about teens kind of falling on the spectrum, where on one end you have teens who are peer rejected. So these are the teens who are actively seeking out peers, but because they don't have the skills yet, they're being actively rejected, right? So they're the ones that are being teased and bullied. And on the other end of the continuum, we tend to think of teens that are socially neglected, isolated. These are teens that may be more socially withdrawn, shy, and they often fall through the cracks because they're not drawing that kind of attention to them. So these teens present very differently, but then they both present for social skills treatment. And so it's thinking about, how do we tailor the intervention to really meet the needs of these different teens. A lot of our teens experience peer conflict, so when they have arguments with their friends, this typically ends in the termination of that friendship. We know arguments are a common part and a very normal part of relationships, and it's about helping our teens develop strategies to handle those disagreements so that they can maintain their friendships. And we think that it may be related to their dichotomous or kind of concrete thinking, where either we're getting along and we're friends, or we're not getting along, so this friendship is over. So it's really helping our teens kind of balance that middle ground. And altogether, these difficulties can result in a lack of close reciprocal friendships. So the literature indicates that, unfortunately, many of our teens have few meaningful reciprocal friendships, and when they do have friendships, they tend to be a poor friendship quality. And so it's really about helping our teens identify who are going to be appropriate peers so that they can have those meaningful friendships. If you ask teens if they have friends, they'll jump and say, yeah, I have many friends, right? When you explore a little bit further, you get more information. They may say, yeah, I have friends, but those are friends that maybe they sit next to them at lunch, but they're not interacting with them, they're not talking with them. Or it might be a friend that comes over after school to play video games, but interaction only happens within the context of that video game and they're not being invited elsewhere. For example, a couple weeks ago, I interviewed a teen for our group, asked if he had friends. He said, yeah, I have lots of friends. When I followed up, it turned out to be the five-year-old child of his mother's friend who would come over when his mother's friend would come over to play. So it's really about helping them identify who are going to be appropriate sources of friends. So we know social skills training is a very common and popular form of treatment. However, generally, it's not as effective as it could be for various reasons. So one of the first reasons is that they don't address treatment outcomes. So many of these programs aren't testing or talking to their participants at the end or the families at the end to see, did the program or did the intervention really help in their social skills or in the development of friendships? So it's really important to see, is what we're doing actually helping our teens and their families? Another limitation is that many of these interventions fail to tailor their teaching methods to the strengths and weaknesses of the teens. So we know many teens with ASD tend to think in very concrete, literal terms. Knowing that, we don't want to provide lessons or skills that uses a lot of analogies, metaphors, figurative language, but oftentimes that's not considered when people are presenting these skills to them. At the same time, knowing that maybe they have concrete, they tend to think in concrete and literal terms, then it's about, okay, well, how can we break down these social situations that may seem very abstract and break it down in very concrete and behavioral ways so that they're more readily understandable to our teens? A big pet peeve that Dr. Lageson has is that many existing interventions don't teach ecologically valid skills. And these are skills that not as adults we think teens should be doing when they're trying to make and keep friends, but they're really skills that teens, socially accepted and successful teens, are doing naturally in their social situations. Many existing programs don't include homework assignments, and we know that homework assignments are important so that our teens are getting practice throughout the week, practice using those skills in their naturalistic setting, at schools, in the community, in their home, to start developing these meaningful friendships. And also many treatments don't include parents or teachers in the treatment. The reality is, as clinicians, the time that we get to work with our families is time limited. So at the Peers program, we only see families for 14 weeks for 90 minutes a week. And that's really not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things. So it's really about how can we educate and train parents and teachers to become effective social coaches so that they can continue to provide learning opportunities to their teens throughout the week and after the treatment has ended. In regards to the research, there are also limitations. So many studies examining social skills interventions don't use randomized control trials. They're not using independent raters. So those are maybe teachers who are uninvolved with the study to really see if what you're doing is leading to meaningful changes and other people are noticing these changes as well. Many studies don't use active treatment control groups, so they're not comparing their treatment with another treatment. And finally, many studies don't assess the stability of treatment gains over time. So whether or not we are really enhancing the social skills of our teens beyond the immediate treatment context. So because of all of these limitations in the research and knowing that many of our teens struggle in developing and keeping meaningful friendships, Dr. Lageson and Dr. Frankel co-developed Peers, which is a program for the education and enrichment of relational studies. This program was developed approximately 8 years ago, but as of 2010, it's been available as a manualized intervention. And one of the things that makes Peers unique from many other programs is that it's parent-assisted, which means when teens are coming in for their session, teens are in one room learning the skills, and in another room we have the parents there who are also learning the skills, but we're specifically focused on training parents to become more effective coaches. Peers addresses the core social deficits that I talked about earlier, and the goal of Peers and our focus is on friendship skills. So it's really about, how can our teens make and keep friends, and that's the overarching goal that we present to our teens week in and week out. Another thing that makes Peers unique from other programs is that it teaches ecologically valid skills. Again, those are skills that not we as adults want to teach our teens, but what teens out there are naturally doing on a day-to-day basis. It's a 14-week curriculum, and each session is 90 weeks, and we meet once a week. And it's an evidence-based treatment for teens in middle school, and we also have a young adult program, and it's for young adults between the ages of 18 and 24. So let me talk about some of the evidence-based methods of instruction that we use in peers. And for any of you who are also thinking about maybe developing a social skills curriculum, it's really important about trying to integrate some of these evidence-based methods that the research shows is effective in teaching social skills to individuals with ASD. So the first thing is to have a small group format, ideally between 7 to 8 group members, and that allows our teens to practice the skills with one another. Right? We want to, as much as possible, replicate, what are they going to experience when they leave our treatment setting? So, what they would typically see at school or in their community. It's important to have those concurrent parent sessions where you're training and educating parents. And it's important to have parents as an active part of treatment because they can expand their teens' social opportunities. So one of the biggest responsibility of parents in the peers program is to identify extracurricular activities for our teens where they'll have access to other peers with similar interests. Parents can also be great social coaches, so parents could fine-tune their teen skills throughout the week, and parents can also assist with homework compliance. It's important to have a didactic lesson, and when you're having a lesson, you want to break have the lessons be very structured, and you want to break down all the tips of social etiquette, all the ways of social etiquette into concrete rules and steps. And then you want to try to use a Socratic method of instruction. So rather than lecturing to teens, which, I'm sure we all know that teens can tend to kind of drown us out, right? We use a Socratic method of instruction where we actually ask teens questions, and we ask questions in a way that will elicit a specific answer. So basically, we're giving the teens the answer in the question, and by using a Socratic method of instruction, we're keeping the teens engaged, right? Because we're asking them questions. But because because they feel like they're generating these rules on their own, they tend to kind of buy into treatment more, and they really, start to believe that, this is what I should be doing, and it's going to work. So after you have a lesson, it's important to follow up with some kind of role play demonstration where you can model the appropriate social skill. But at times we also model inappropriate social skill demonstrations, right? Again, it's a way to keep teens involved. But teens also love to watch our behavioral coaches mess up in social situations and point out all the social errors that they're doing. And then we follow up with behavioral rehearsal where teens have an opportunity to practice the skills with us, with the coaches, and with each other. And that provides us another opportunity for us to provide in vivo performance feedback, so fine-tuning their skills in the moment. So all these things are important, but ultimately the most important thing is whether or not they're able to use these skills in their natural settings. And so that real-life component, the real-life practice component is significant. So we want to assign homework assignments where they're practicing these skills. And again, the parent assistance is integral in having our teens practice throughout the week. So in terms of our peers curriculum, these are all the skills that we teach to our teens. We start off with verbal and nonverbal conversation skills. We talk about, what are the rules for having a two-way conversation. And we also restructure the way our teens think about conversations by giving them a very concrete goal. So the goal for having a conversation is, you want to trade information so you can find those common interests, right? So it's, again, breaking down these these situations that can seem very abstract and breaking them down into very concrete goals. From there, we move on to electronic communication. Now, this is this is quickly becoming the way that teens are communicating, right? So it's important that we teach them skills for, how do you text message? How do you instant message? Tips for using social networking sites. We also talk about online safety and cyberbullying as well. From there, we'll go on to choosing appropriate friends and talk about decoding their social landscape, how they can start identifying appropriate peer groups. And then we'll talk about appropriate use of humor. So I'm sure you guys all know humor can be one of the fastest ways to attract people, right? But it could also be one of the quickest ways we can push people away if we're not able to use our humor appropriately. So we go over how you want to modulate your humor use when you're first trying to make and keep friends. And then we'll talk about peer entry and exit strategies, so if what our teens can do when they want to go up to a group of friends, and also how they can assess whether or not they're being accepted, and if they're not being accepted, then what are the steps for exiting that peer interaction. From there, we'll move on to get-togethers, so things that our teens can do to start laying the groundwork for having get-togethers with peers and what they should be doing during get-togethers. We also have a lesson on good sportsmanship, so how to be a good sport, kind of going with the flow, keeping your cool. And as our teens become more socially engaged, it's important that we teach them how to, or we give them skills on how to handle socially difficult situations. And so we talk about peer rejection, so what to do if you find yourself being verbally teased or physically bullied. We also talk about peer conflicts, so how, what are the steps for handling a disagreement? What are you going to do if you find yourself being the target of rumor and gossip? And also steps for changing the reputation if that's what they so choose. And then we end with a graduation ceremony. Okay. So I want to start off with a clinical example, and this is a lesson on peer entry or entering conversation. And so I want to ask you guys a question. What are most teens told to do by adults when they're trying to meet a new group of people? Introduce yourself, right? Anything else? Yeah. So they're told to go up to people, right? Either say hi and shake their hand. Is that what teens do? Can you imagine one of your our teens at a party or at lunch wanting to go up to a group of friends, and they walk up and they say, hi. Oh, hi, I'm Mina. How is that going to come across? No. Weird, right? And that isn't what socially accepted teens are doing, okay? So I have another question for you guys. What do most teens on the spectrum do when they want to enter conversations? They right up, yeah. So I heard they walk right up and talk, and what do they typically talk about? Their interests, right? And again, that kind of goes back to that social cognition of, not understanding the perspective of others. So while they may love to talk about Warhammer, other teens may not, may not have that same level of interest. So we want to teach our teens ecologically valid skills, okay? So these are the ecologically valid skills for entering a conversation. So the first thing our teens want to do is to watch and listen. So what they're listening for is a topic. So what is the group of teens talking about? And is this something that they can contribute to? Okay, something that they can meaningfully add to. As they're listening, they're also watching from a distance. So we want them to be watching. We say having a prop can be helpful. So if they have their phone, they can kind of be checking their phone or checking their iPod. And then periodically making eye contact, right? Kind of checking in. And then while they're doing this, they want to be thinking about, do we have common interests? And is there a way that I could contribute to the conversation? If not, then that's not the right conversation to be joining into, okay? So as they're watching and listening, they want to then wait for one of two things. So they want to wait for a slight pause in the conversation, or they want to wait for a sign of receptiveness from the group. So most often, a group will notice that you're nearby, and they'll turn to look at you, okay? And at that point, then our teens should join. So they're going to join by moving closer, or they will, and then they're going to join by making a comment or a question that's on topic. So again, that goes back to that first step of listening and making sure that they could add something to the conversation. So those are the steps that our teens are going to take to enter a conversation, and those are the things that socially accepted teens are naturally doing. Now, once they're in there, we need to teach our teens, how can you assess whether or not you're being accepted, right? And it's not that hard to do. Think about how you guys assess whether or not you're being accepted into an interaction, right? When you think about a group, they tend to talk in a circle, right? Everybody talks in a circle. So when you're being accepted, what does that circle tend to do? It opens up, right? Or if you're not being accepted, what does that group do? They close the circle, right? We talk about, they might give you the cold shoulder. And so we break it down to our teens in terms of looking for 3 things to figure out if they're being accepted by the group. So look at body language. Are they opening that circle? Are they starting to face you? Okay? Or are they closing that circle and maybe turning their back toward you? Eye contact. Are they looking at you when they're talking to you? Or are they looking away? Or maybe are they rolling their eyes at you? And also look for verbal cues. If they're interested, they're going to be talking to you, asking you questions, right? If they're not so interested, then they're not going to be talking to you or answering your questions. Another clinical example is how to handle verbal teasing, and this goes under the peer rejection lesson. So another question for you guys, what are most teens told to do in response to verbal teasing? Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Ignore it, that's one. They're typically told 3 things. Ignoring is one. Walk away and tell an adult, right? What's the problem with ignoring it? It escalates, right? What's the problem with walking away? They come after and they tease you even more, right? And what's the problem with telling an adult? You get a bad reputation, it can escalate, people will start calling you a snitch, right? Those are not ecologically valid skills. So another question, what do teens with ASD do in response to verbal teasing? They typically do one of 2 things, or both. Stand there, take it, yeah, they might do that. What else? Yeah, we definitely see those, and typically we see, our teens tell us that they'll lose their cool, right? Get really upset, get really worked up, and some of them may actually tease back, right? Try to defend themselves, and they'll tease back. Again, these are not things that socially accepted teens are doing. So when you talk, we need to introduce, what are the ecologically valid skills for handling verbal teasing? Because the reality is, everybody's teased, right? It doesn't matter how popular you are, everybody's teased. It's really about, what do you do in response to teasing so that you're less likely to be teased in the future. So the first thing our teens want to do is act like what that person said didn't bother them. So they want to keep their cool, right? After they do that, they want to provide a brief comeback that suggests what the person said was lame. And at peers, we call this tease the tease. So you're not teasing the teaser, but you're teasing what that person said to you. So an example of a brief teasing comeback would be whatever, anyway, big deal, and your point is, okay? Oftentimes our teens will have to use these teasing comeback, have to use 2 or 3 of these teasing comebacks. And then the last thing they want to do is then walk away and remove themselves and hopefully go to another peer group or go to a different activity, okay? And they may have to do this over time, right? Because that peer is going to expect our teen to get worked up, right, or to tease back. And so it's really about, changing that pattern of behavior so that our teens have these skills and that they'll be less likely to be teased in the future. Okay? So I've gone over some of the lessons for peers and the strategies that we use to teach all the different skills. And I want to show you a brief video that will hopefully highlight this a little bit better.
Live from NBC4, this is the Channel 4 News at 5.
1 in 150 children born in the U.S. has autism. What happens now when all of these children grow up to be teenagers? There is a new program out there now in Southern California that helps them adjust to life in middle school and then beyond. Dr. Bruce Hensel is here now with that story. Bruce?
That's right, Colleen, and it is Autism Awareness Month, the last day. The teenage years, of course, are when kids start to form social circles and learn to become independent. This special class focuses on coping and making life richer for high-functioning autistic teens and their families during this crucial time.
Hi.
This is no ordinary teenage get-together. It's actually a serious lesson on social skills for autistic kids, and it's part of a unique program at UCLA called Peers.
How do you have a successful get-together with someone? How do you go up to a group of teens and join their conversation? And unfortunately, our kids with autism, they're a little bit more challenged in that area, and they don't naturally understand these social cues.
Actor Gary Cole and his wife Teddy worried about their daughter Mary transitioning into middle school.
When they're small, you can pick up the phone. You can control, in a way, a social life for your child. As they get older, you can't do it.
So they brought her to Peers, where autistic teens get concrete rules on social etiquette, specific steps they can take in certain social situations, and the opportunity to practice.
Are they trying to get a reaction out of you when they tease you? I'm going to give you some new strategies tonight to trouble that aren't going to make them want to retaliate against you. Okay? Now here's the thing. This is how you act like what they said didn't bother you. You give them a little comeback that tells them what they said was kind of lame. You say something like, whatever. So what? Big deal. Who cares? Okay, so let's try this again. Man, Mira, those shoes are ugly.
Whatever.
I'm serious, those are some really ugly shoes.
Yeah, and?
Those are some ugly shoes.
Who cares?
Okay, very good. Round of applause for Mary. Well done.
What I like about it is they're there to help you, and it's helped me more get into conversations and have more things to do.
While the class is going on, the parents are being coached in the next room, learning to assist their teens in making and keeping friends.
What we're going to talk about is what they're going to learn today.
Mary has been putting what she's learned into practice, and friends have noticed.
In school, she wouldn't really talk to a lot of people, but now I see her getting more involved with like a lot more people.
Well, I hung out with my friends, Cody and Sarah. I felt more open, like I got to see the outside world.
And you can see here, now results of testing shows that teens who have been through the program, the PEERS program, after 14 weeks, are having many more get-togethers and far more peer interactions with their friends outside school. Now, for information like this, right on your phone, text the word HEALTH to 85.
Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit about the research behind PEERS, and Dr. Leaf this morning had talked about how it's important to make sure that we're using evidence-based practices. So the first study was done back in 2009, and it's in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, and it was our first randomized control trial for PEERS. So we had 33 teens, and they were randomly assigned to either an immediate treatment group or a waitlist control group, so they received treatment at a later point. In terms of the two groups, there were no significant differences across the immediate treatment group or the control group. We had more males and females. We had a pretty ethnically diverse group. Most of our teens were in a general education classroom setting. We had a few in a special education setting, and then we had an even smaller number that were homeschooled. In regards to their baseline assessment, again, there weren't any significant differences across either group. What you see here is the K-BIT, which is a measure of intellectual functioning. You'll notice that the teens didn't have an intellectual disability, so they were average in terms of their IQ. But what you'll notice on the VABS, which is a measure of adaptive functioning, so how are our teens doing on a day-to-day basis, you'll notice that what the scores show us is that they're significantly impaired in their day-to-day functioning. So while they may have average IQ, their ability to interact with others, to communicate their daily living skills, we're seeing that they're significantly lower than their typically developing peers. So these are the results from that first study, and we collected data from adolescents. So adolescents reported on themselves. We also got information from parents and from teachers. Adolescents stated that, so their scores indicate that they improved on overall social skills knowledge. They also reported having more get-together, so they were interacting with peers more often, and they also reported improvement in the quality of their friendship. Parents reported improvement in their teens' overall social skills on a standardized parent measure. And teachers reported at trend level, so not significant, but close to being significant on the teens' overall social skills. And so Dr. Lageson wanted to follow up with another study to see if they would be able to replicate the findings of this first study, and also see what would be the added and also to see if the gains maintained over time. Remember, we want to see if the teens are really using these skills in a meaningful way and be able to use it over time. And also if we were able to get more teachers to respond to hopefully see, what are the teachers seeing or not seeing in the school setting. Okay, so in the second study, we had 28 teens to participate. Again, they were assigned to either a treatment group, an immediate treatment group, or a delayed treatment control group. And then we followed up the immediate treatment group 14 weeks after treatment to see how they were doing. Again, the teens, there were no significant differences across either groups. They were on average between 14 to 15 years of age. They were in middle school. Again, we had primarily males. We had a pretty ethnically diverse group, and again, most of our teens were in a general education classroom setting. Again, no differences on baseline assessments, so you'll notice that all of our teens had average IQ, but they were significantly delayed in their adaptive living skills. On the task, which is a measure of social skills knowledge, it's out of a possible 26, and you see on average they got 13, so they didn't have as much knowledge in regards to social skills. The QSQ is a measure of get-togethers, and so what you'll see here is that on average our teens were having one hosted or less than one hosted get-together a month, and they're being invited to less than one hosted. They were being invited to less than one get-together a month. So our teens are pretty socially isolated. And the last two are, it's the parent standardized measure of social skills and problem behavior. And what you'll note is that they're delayed in those areas as well. So for the results of the second study, again, Dr. Lageson collected adolescent report, parent report, teacher report, and then she also collected data 14 weeks after the treatment ended. Again, the teens reported improvement in their knowledge of social skills, and they reported to have more social get-togethers with their friends. Parents corroborated this finding, saying that their teens were interacting with their peers more often. Again, parents reported improvement in overall social skills on the SSRS, and this time Dr. Lageson wanted to look at specifically in what areas they were improving, and they were improving in the areas cooperation, assertion, and responsibility. She also included the social responsiveness scale on this second study. It's a measure that was created by John Constantino, and it looks at overall social impairment or social responsiveness. And what they found was that after the treatment, the teens improved in their overall social responsiveness and across all 5 subscales. So they improved in social awareness, social cognition, social communication, social motivation, and autistic mannerisms. At the 14-week follow-up, we saw a nice maintenance of treatment gains on all the different measures, on all the various measures except for social cognition. And there could be various hypotheses for this, but we think it might be related to the fact that it's a core deficit for our teens, and maybe the 14-week period just isn't long enough for us to to target these skills where it would kind of show up in these analyses. However, they did find new treatment gains at the 14-week period. So parents reported that their teens were improving in their problem behaviors. So they improved in their self-control and their externalizing problem behaviors. And this time, teachers reported significant improvement in the teens' social skills, specifically in the area of assertion. More recently, we did a long-term follow-up study where we followed our teens 1 to 5 years post-treatment. Families are always asking us, what do teens look like? Are they still using these skills way long after the treatment is over? And so this was, I think this will be published this year, but data was collected 1 to 5 years post-treatment. Out of 82 potential participants, we were able to get responses from 53 teens and their families, which is a 64 response rate. And if any of you are familiar with the literature, that's pretty impressive. There were no significant differences between the participants and non-participants when we looked at their baseline measures. The mean age at the time of follow-up was approximately 17 years of age, and they were juniors in high school. And the mean time to follow-up was 29 months. So we have a lot of data for this study, but I wanted to share this with you. So the first set of findings were on the parent-reported social skills measure. And T1 is the teens at baseline, so what they look like when they're first coming in for treatment. T2 was at the time at the end of treatment, so our very last session, and T3 is a follow-up period. So what we're seeing here is that at time 1, our teens are, they're having difficulty with social skills, right? They're having difficulty interacting with their peers. At T2, they improved, and they're falling now within the average range. And at T3, which is that follow-up period, 1 to 5 years, they're maintaining those gains, and they've even improved slightly. And again, all these differences were statistically significant. In regards to problem behaviors, we're seeing great results as well. And this time you want to see scores going down because higher scores indicate higher problem behaviors. So when teens are first coming into treatment, they're elevated in their problem behaviors. At the end of treatment at T2, we notice a decrease in the problem behaviors. And then we see a continued decrease 1 to 5 years after treatment. We want to look at those specific subscales to see where they were improving. And I know it's a lot. So the blue are the teens at time 1, at baseline. The orange or the red is at the end of treatment, and the green is at the follow-up period. And overall, what you see is, all the scores are moving in the right direction. So the teens are improving in cooperation, assertiveness, empathy, and self-control. And they're exhibiting less externalizing behaviors and less internalizing behaviors. And now this is a measure of overall social responsiveness. And here you want to be seeing lower scores because lower scores indicate less social impairment. So at time 1, you'll see that our teens are severely socially impaired per parent report. At the end of treatment, they've decreased, and then now they fall in the mild to moderate range. And these treatment gains have maintained at the follow-up period. When we're looking at the subscales on that measure of overall social responsiveness, again, we're seeing everything moving in the right direction where, again, we want lower scores because lower scores indicate improvement. So the teens are improving in social awareness, social cognition, social communication, social motivation, and autistic mannerisms. We also wanted to see, what do they look like in terms of their get-togethers? Are they continuing to socially interact with their peers? So blue is parent report and red is teen report. So at time 1, our teens were having approximately 2 get-togethers a month. That's not a lot. They're pretty socially isolated. At time 2, the teens are having approximately 4 to 6 get-togethers a month. And at time 3, our teens are having about 4 get-togethers a month. And that's actually what we prescribe to our families at the end of treatment because, again, these are still relatively new skills, right? And so we recommend at the end of treatment that families try to have at least 1 get-together a week, which comes out to 4 a month. You'll notice at time 2 that teens reported more get-togethers than their parents. When we were looking at the data, it turns out that the teens were having get-togethers that their parents didn't know about. So after school, teens were hanging out with their friends, grabbing a bite to eat at Burger King, and they were having all these spontaneous, unstructured social interactions, which is what we want our teens to be doing. Okay. On a measure of overall social skills knowledge, again, we see that teens improved from pre-treatment to post-treatment. We saw a slight decrease at the 1 to 5 year mark, but it's still higher than at the time of, at the start of intervention. Okay. So when we're looking at these overall skills and that our teens are maintaining these skills and continuing to get together with their friends 1 to 5 years after treatment has ended, it's important to think about what factors are helping our teens do this. And while at peers we'd like to take some credit for this, it really comes down to the parents. Parents come in for 14 weeks. They're dedicated parents who are motivated, willing to learn, and they're the ones who, day in, day out, both during and after treatments, they're the ones who are being social coaches to our teens, right? They're the ones who are continuing to provide social opportunities and provide feedback to our teens so that they can continue to grow and develop in their skills and really put them on the track to develop meaningful friendships. Dr. Lageson has also completed a couple of school-based studies. The first study compared peers to a different social skills curriculum, so that's using an active treatment control group, and about 73 teens participated in this study. In a second study, she compared peers, and this time she looked at whether or not there would be additional benefit to adding parent assistance to the school-based peers program. The results for both of these studies are promising, and she's hoping to have them available within within the next year. But both of these studies were run at a non-public school for students with ASD. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of the Village Glen School through the Help Group. It was a teacher-facilitated program, and it was 14 weeks long, where the students received daily lessons in the class. They had shorter lessons and more behavioral rehearsal. Dr. Lagason is also collaborating with Dr. Morella de Preto, and this is an fMRI treatment outcome study, and it's pretty exciting because they're investigating changes in the brain that are associated with the treatment gains that we see when our teens come out of treatment. So one of the paradigms is a cyberball paradigm, and that tries to simulate peer rejection. So our teens will go into an fMRI scanner, they'll be wearing virtual reality goggles, and they're told that they're playing a game of cyberball, so kind of throwing a ball back and forth with two other teens in the building who are also in scanners wearing virtual reality goggles. Of course, it's all a simulation, and as they're playing, the other two kids in the scanner actually stop throwing the ball to our teens, and that's supposed to simulate peer rejection. And so Dr. de Preto is saying, what are the changes in the brain when that happens? Okay. Right now, we're also running a virtual coach study. So we know more and more our teens are attached to their phones, and so we wanted to think about, what's a way that we could use technology and use electronic communication and really help our teens develop these social skills. And so right now we're testing the effectiveness of a virtual coach. So basically what the goal is, the teens will have an application on their iPhone or on their iPod, and depending on what social situation they're in, they'll be able to pull up a lesson, see the different skills, and then watch an embedded video showing what to do when you're trying to, say, slip into a conversation. So we're actually recruiting for this study right now, and we're going to have 3 groups. We're going to have treatment as usual, which is peers with a parent-assisted component, then peers with a virtual coach component, and then a delayed treatment control trial. And finally, I'm collaborating with Dr. Lagason in developing a Peers for Preschoolers curriculum. So, there's a lot, we know that, early intervention is important, and so thinking about how can we teach ecologically valid skills to preschoolers, to, our young kids from an early age, and hopefully, help them early enough where we're not going to see the exacerbation of some of these social difficulties. It'll be a puppet-facilitated lesson where parents will be involved, and the children will be between the ages of 4 to 6 in the preschool setting. Okay. So I wanted to leave some time for questions. Anybody have any questions? Yes. So the question is whether or not we're looking for preschoolers to participate in the study. We will, not as of yet. Right now we're in the process of developing the curriculum, but we will. Everything will be posted on our website once we get there. Yes, so the question is whether the manual is available to parents. So actually, I forgot my last slide here. So we do have the manual, it's available. The manual is written for professionals to be used, but it is available on Amazon. And we also have peers training seminars throughout the year at UCLA, and again, this is geared toward training professionals to provide this intervention. We have one coming up on November 6th, and I think we have 1 or 2 spots available, so if you are interested. It's a 4-day training. In that training, you'll get a copy of the peers manual. You'll also get an unpublished copy of the school curriculum that I talked about earlier, and also research and clinical materials. For graduate students and postdoctoral fellows who are interested, we provide scholarships to attend the training. 3 to 4 scholarships are provided per year, and it's for those who are interested in the peers program and wanting to maybe conduct some research in the area.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Is this available other than for autism, for example, ADD?
Yeah, great question. So we actually run 2 groups throughout the week, and our first group is an ASD-specific group, and then we also run another group which is kind of a catch-all group. So it's for teens who have social impairment. So typically you'll have teens who have ADHD or just difficulty. They maybe have anxiety, so so they haven't developed some of those social skills. But we know that this manual is helpful for both groups of teens because it just kind of really breaks some things down into a concrete way, and there's a lot of behavioral rehearsal so they can pick up these skills. Yeah.
Cost for the program?
Cost of the program. I will direct you to our website to get more information for that and to contact our clinic coordinator. They'll be able to provide you with information on that. Yeah.
Other questions?
For the years of virtual coach, you commented that you're currently recruiting. Is the information on that also on your website?
Yes, for the virtual coach study, yes, all information is available at this time.
Thanks.
Do you have an age group on that you can just tell us?
Great question. So when we talk about teens, it's really, what is their social context? So we don't instead of having an age group, we say teens who are either in middle school or high school. So, the focus is more on their social context, social landscape, rather than age. So sometimes we have, 18-year-olds who are in our teen group because they're still in high school. Or we might have younger kids who are maybe 10 or 11 who are entering middle school, and so we'll have them in the groups as well. We have a question back there. Thank you.
You said you have 2 classes available.
Yes.
Is the ASD class, are these kids labeled? Are they told they have ASD and that's why they have these problems? Is that...
Good question, right. So the focus of our group, so even though our first group is a specifically ASD group, the focus isn't on diagnosis. And so some of the teens that are in our group know that they have a diagnosis and some don't. And that, we don't focus on diagnosis, we kind of focus on the skills and the focus. And what we tell our teens is, we're all here because, we're all here for the purpose of making and keeping friends. So that's how we present the skills to our teens. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so he asked where the classes are held. So right now our groups are held at UCLA. But we also have, because people have come through our training, we also have peer certified providers in the community. So if you wanted to see if there's somebody near your community, you can always check our website or call our coordinator and they'll be able to provide you with more information on that. Yes?
Is there any reason this wouldn't apply to younger children with high functioning autism?
Yeah, so there's actually a group also at UCLA, it's called the Children's Friendship Group, where they're focused more on the school age group, but it's, the skills are similar in terms of targeting ecologically valid skills and the way it's broken down. Yeah. Great, thank you so much.
The Autism Research Institute relies on the generosity of donors like you to make this webcast possible. If you enjoy this presentation, please consider making a donation. Thank you.